The first reading today is from Acts 4, verses 32 through 35. The community of believers was of one heart and mind, and no one claimed that any of his possessions was his own, but they had everything in common. With great power, the apostles bore witness to the resurrection of the Lord Jesus, and great favor was accorded them all. Sorry. There was no needy person among them, for those who owned property or houses would sell them, bring the proceeds of the sale, and put them at the feet of the apostles, and they were distributed to each according to need. The second reading is from, I have no idea where it's from. Okay, John, thank you. 20, verses 19 through 31. On the evening of that first day of the week, when the doors were locked, where the disciples were, for fear of the Jews, Jesus came and stood in their midst and said to them, "Peace be with you." When he had said this, he showed them his hands and his side. The disciples rejoiced when they saw the Lord. Jesus said to them again, "Peace be with you. As the Father has sent me, so I send you." And when he had said this, he breathed on them and said to them, "Receive the Holy Spirit. Whose sins you forgive are forgiven them, and whose sins you retain are retained." Thomas, called Didymus, one of the 12, was not with them when Jesus came. So the other disciples said to him, "We have seen the Lord." But he said to them, "Unless I see the mark of the nails in his hands, and put my finger into the nail marks, and put my hand into his side, I will not believe." Now a week later, his disciples were again inside, and Thomas was with them. Jesus came, although the doors were locked, and stood in their midst and said, "Peace be with you." Then he said to Thomas, "Put your finger here and see my hands, and bring your hand and put it into my side. And do not be unbelieving, but believe." Thomas answered and said to him, "My Lord and my God." Jesus said to him, "Have you come to believe because you have seen me? Blessed are those who have not seen and have believed." Now Jesus did many other signs in the presence of his disciples that are not written in this book, but these are written that you may come to believe that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God, and that through this belief you may have life in his name. Here ends the reading.
Well, we're lucky today to have the Reverend Father Patrick Flanagan with us. He sent me his bio. It's quite lengthy. I know Patrick for, how many, 56? How old are you?
44.
No, he's not 44, please. You can see this little group here. We grew up on Tardy Lane in Wantor. They were 50, I was 53, they were 56, right across the street. So I know him for all these years. His parents, Claire and Tom, and the rest of the group here, it was a really close-knit block back then. And Patrick has been part of like the family for everyone in Tardy Lane. Funerals, weddings, whatever you can afford, he will do. But I'll just give you a little background on him that, like I said, we grew up in St. Francis de Chantal Wantor, attending parochial school there. He went to Holy Trinity High School, then he went to Niagara University, Mary Immaculate Seminary, and Immaculate Conception Seminary in Huntington. He also spent a year at the Vincentians Internal Seminary in Germantown, Philadelphia, ordained in 1992. Oh, which you're almost what, 30? Yeah, 30th year coming, 20th year, 30th year coming up. By Rockville Center Bishop John Mccain at the Shrine of Miraculous Medal in Germantown. And he was assigned to a local parish at the Immaculate Conception as the parochial vicar. In 1994, he returned to Niagara University to serve as the campus minister. And in 1998, he joined the religious community at DePaul University in Chicago, as he studied PhD in ethics at Loyola University. I don't know you for much ethics, Patrick, that's for sure. He completed his dissertation focused on relationship between information technology and the common good. And since 2003, he's been back in New York, has served locally in the Diocese of Brooklyn at St. John's University, where he's a tenured professor and superior of the Vincentian community at the university. At St. John's, he teaches classes in environmental, social, medical, and business ethics. And additionally, he has published articles in numerous journals and presented at academic conferences. And presently, he's completing a manuscript with Lexington Books on the 7 deadly sins of technology. I have one of them right here. That's it. So Patrick's gonna give us a nice sermon. I just wanted to tell him this one thing about us. As you can see by the amount of people here, this is a very rich parish. And I remember that on one beautiful Sunday morning, Reverend Bernard announces to the congregation, "My good people, I have here in my hands 3 sermons. A $100 sermon that lasts 5 minutes, a $50 sermon that lasts 15 minutes, and a $20 sermon that lasts a full hour. Now we'll take up the collection and see what she'll deliver." So I take great pleasure in presenting Reverend Father Patrick Flanagan. Yes, right.
Thank you, Peter. I'm actually surprised that you had all the information for me. I'm very kind. Well, first of all, good morning to you and good morning to everyone that's online and that we're watching this. I'm very grateful to your pastor, Reverend Lance Hurst, as well as Emmy and Beth, for going through all the important details that had to precede this Sunday, so your pastor could take a Sunday off. I have 2 sisters, Kathy and Mary. And Mary, after my dad died in '99, she automatically took over as the central force in our lives. She is a saint, a living saint. Sometimes I'm always the baby who's being corrected. I'm always the one that's being disciplined, but she's so good. She really is. And so when the pandemic began, people are all scrambling around for figuring out ways to stay connected. Immediately she said to me, "I want you to set up a Zoom call." And I said, okay. I said, "Mary, you know what a Zoom call is?" "I don't know what it is, but I do know that people can talk to each other and see each other." Okay, so I did that. So it was 1 day a week. It was on Wednesdays. And then all of a sudden, people started joining us. Now, this is important because my sister Kathy is handicapped, as you see. And also I have a brother who lives in Atlanta and a brother lives in Australia. And I have a niece in Bayside and a nephew in Smithtown with his wife and kids. And so what we did was he extended it because there was so much, people were starting to come on. People heard about this. So we joined Peter, his sister Christine, and a whole bunch of other people from Australia that we never heard of, people from everywhere and anywhere. And so it turned into an event on Monday, Wednesday, and Saturday now. What's amazing to me is that people say, "I would love to be a part of that. What do you do? What do you talk about?" And I say, it's like a Seinfeld event. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. It's awfully inane in so many respects. And it truly is, because I mean, it's just, how's the weather? How's everything going on? Anyone has a comment? There are a couple of, those lulls in conversation where you worry about whether it's able to be continued. That in fact happens a great deal. But my niece Maureen gets awfully frustrated by the fact that the conversation inevitably turns to Toddy Lane. So I could not help but think that Peter dedicated the flowers today in memory of our parents who lived on Toddy Lane. Now, Toddy Lane, you may not know the names, but you'll know the numbers, because people don't refer to people as names on the block. They refer to them as numbers. The people at 77, the people at 34, the people at 128. These are the people that made up our neighborhood. And indeed, we had a phenomenal neighborhood because it was so wonderful. I mean, we had a block But there was this business of people living together at this space that seemingly has not been able to be replicated in my life. Although my sister, as well as perhaps my brothers and my niece and nephew, have found neighborhoods that replicated. You see, this was an area where you could count on people. When you got in trouble, when you ran into difficulty, people were there. When you needed something, I remember going next door to the Donovans at 52 and asking for food. Now, it'd be something as simple as sugar or flour, but there was no hesitation. We went down the street to ask people to use the lawnmowers, their hedge clippers. People were incredibly generous. I could not believe this. So much so that you'd be playing with people. Remember the days when the kids used to play with each other? And so be playing with each other, and the parents would say, "Why don't you stay for dinner?" Well, I leveraged that. I got 2 dinners, as you can tell. So I got one from them, I got one from my family. But it was a really idyllic situation, a really moment in time that everyone treasures. So while people get frustrated, like my niece Maureen, about talking about Tardy Lane, indeed, this was an experience that was caught up in time. I think about the experience of the Acts of the Apostles today. The Acts of the Apostles, holy cow. They held everything in common. No one went needing anything. No one actually suffered because people were so attentive. That is incredible. And I say to myself, why can't we replicate that? Why can't we actually market that as an opportunity for us to think as an ideal? You see, the apostles were so much on fire with the resurrection. They were so filled with the energy of the reality of what's just transpired. The gift that was theirs, that God made good on God's promises. And in doing so, they wanted to make sure that gift was shared with others. We look back in the Acts of the Apostles, and we say to ourselves, that was something quite nice and beautiful. And there was something extraordinarily nice there. But it's also a template for us, an opportunity for us to think about, maybe we want to recreate that same template within our own families. You might say, oh, it's too far gone. It's never too late. It's too far gone for the church. It's too far gone for our community. It's too far gone for our nation or global village. Absolutely not, because God's work is never done. And that's what's key. So, first lesson that we hear from the scriptures today is indeed that sense of sharing, that sense of attentiveness, that sense of mindfulness, an active presentation of who and what God is. The second lesson that we gained from the scriptures today comes from the last section of John that was read so beautifully by our poet laureate. And we find ourselves hearing the story of Thomas. But before that, we hear the story of the apostles in that upper room. Now, we might say to ourselves, oh, the apostles in that upper room, they're sitting there partying. Woohoo! Jesus is risen from the dead. This is exciting. He made good on his promises. You know as well as I do, there was no sort of celebrating. There was no excitement. There was no thrill. They had locked the doors securely for fear of the Jews, and I'll speak about that in a few minutes. And they were deathly afraid because they recognized that if they were caught, if they were hunted down, they would suffer the same fate as Jesus did. In so many respects, they were anxious, they were worried, they were frustrated, but at the same time, you can only imagine how embarrassed they felt. Because they're starting to hear that Jesus is risen from the dead. And they say to themselves, what if this is true? What if this is in fact the reality of our lives, of our faith? Everything will be changed. But I'm sure they felt an extraordinary amount of guilt that they abandoned their friend on the cross. They had given up on their rabbi and deserted him. So the second lesson for today we might want to think about is our upper rooms. Where are the upper rooms in our life where we find ourselves anxious, worried, upset, distracted, awfully complacent, almost feeling as though we abandoned the people we love and hopeless. And then let's hear the words of Jesus, who transverses both space and time in his resurrected body. Peace be with you. Peace be with you. Peace be with you. Not once, but 3 times does Jesus say that to assure them that they got it. Because you recognize that when you are in such a sorry state, when I'm in such a sorry state, and people say something good to me, I'm like, I can't hear it the first time. So what are our upper rooms? Where do we find ourselves? So distracted, so worried, so anxious. And allow God to penetrate those walls and to heal us, to free us, to send us forth. The next lesson we hear is the story of Thomas. And as you see on the cover of the bulletin, the beautiful replication of Caravaggio's Thomas. Thomas touching the hands, the feet, and the side of Jesus. Thomas is consolation for us because in so many ways, Thomas is like us. We want proof. We want evidence that Jesus is real. We want to make sure that this project of what we're undertaking as church, as personal faith, is in fact all worth it. And we know people that have doubted. So we think of St. Teresa of Calcutta. At the end of a life, having served the people of India so faithfully, so close to God, in the presence of the poor, saying to herself, it just doesn't make sense why I'm suffering, why these people are suffering. She started to have doubts, and it scared her to death. We think of St. John Paul II. St. John Paul II, who himself, at the end of his life, after having suffered the misery of Parkinson's, started to have doubts. But one of the beautiful things about doubts that we learn from the saints is that doubt does not have to be an enemy of faith. Doubt does not have to be an enemy of faith, but doubt can be a part of faith. So as Peter said, I've been at St. John's University for 18 years. I was in Niagara for 4 years. I was out in DePaul for 5 years. I've gotten to know a lot of young people. And one of the great joys of my life is the fact that I have an opportunity to officiate at their marriages. So one of the great things about this is that I get to see them progress. And so often in the first few years of marriage, there's a sense of worry and doubt. First of all, the overwhelming thought that I have to spend the rest of my life with this person, the next 50 or 60 years. But then the second thought is that, did I make the right decision? Is this really real? And they get scared to death that in fact, the marriage is falling apart. And so I'll get a call and I'll say, why don't you take me to a diner? And so just as recently, I had someone take me to the Greenbelt Diner, great diner, by the way. And I said, why are you worried? This is just another step in your journey. So where there is doubt, there's faith and hope, and never lose them. So Thomas asked for proof, and Jesus showed him his hands, his side, and his feet. According to biology, I was a biomedical major at Niagara. I was going to be a surgeon. God called me to a different direction. But according to that reality, that man should be dead, dead, dead. And yet Jesus in his risen body is able to continue his mission. This is very striking. Thomas has shown the wounds of Jesus. So we pray God that God demonstrates for us God's presence over and over again. But then secondly, Jesus shows us his wounds. That even as he shows us his wounds, even as he engages Thomas and displays the horrors of his past, he's able to go on. One of the guys with whom I lived with at St. John's has since moved on to Philadelphia. But he got into a car accident one time. He had a bad scar. And we go down to Jones Beach, and people would say, oh, I wish that man would cover that scar up. He'd say, no, this is a battle wound. I survived that car accident. But so often, when we have wounds, when we have open sores, when we have things that seemingly never go away, we hide them. And only in exposing them to the air, we find ourselves healing. So going back to Toddy Lane, our parents were brilliant people because they had all this medical information that was not written in the books. So we come home with broken ankles, they'd sit us down, they twist and turn our ankles, and everything we fall back to place, we go out and play again. Another thing is we come home with cuts and abrasions and sores. They pour warm water and wash it and tell us to go out. We say, but don't we need a Band-Aid? Go out, they'd say. Because they knew, unless the wound was exposed to the air, it would never heal. So perhaps instead of hiding our wounds, Jesus invites us to show others our wounds and allow them to be healed and to move on. The other piece about this Thomas story is fasting, because it takes us back to one of the earlier parables that Jesus taught. The story of the lost sheep, if you remember. So the farmer loses one sheep and forgets all the other 99. And in doing so, chases after that one sheep. Now, that's absolutely insane. Economically, architecturally, agriculturally, insane. Yet that one sheep means so much to him. Jesus recognizes that that group of 12 that he assembled is incomplete without Thomas. And so he comes back just for Thomas. Just for Thomas, to help him in his journey. Jesus comes back for us all the time when we're lost. When we find ourselves in the outskirts of things, when we find ourselves left out, when we find ourselves seemingly not part of the crowd, Jesus comes and brings us back in and shows us the way. One of the dynamics that preachers in all Christian churches have struggled with over the past few years is that line that the apostles are in that room for fear of the Jews. And people find it offensive, anti-Semitic. But I always say the reality is that we are the Jews. We are the Jews. At our basic heritage, we are the Jews. And so I'm not so sure that we would have been celebrating Jesus' resurrection or living a resurrected life with Jesus. In fact, we might have been the people who tried to quench the excitement, the joy, the thrill of the resurrection. So that's why I don't hesitate there. But do we continue in our world today to quell, to quiet, to almost push the resurrection aside and live life on Good Friday and not on Easter Sunday? One final story. So as Peter said, I went to St. Francis de Chantal in Wantor. I was taught by the Josephite sisters in Brentwood. And every year they have a play. Every term they have a play. So they have the Christmas play, they have the Easter play. And the sister was so good to me because the sister would, in fact, in so many ways, try to pick out a role that was appropriate for the fat kid. I was always fat, okay? Let's be clear about that. So one year I was the shepherd, one year I was something else. But the Easter play was quite difficult because all the guards and all the folks around the Jesus were all strapping and all incredibly in shape. And so she invited me to be the Rock. You just got that, huh? She invited me to be the Rock. And so my sister, who's as creative as can be, was absolutely brilliant. She said, if you're going to be the Rock, we're going to make sure this is a big rock to cover that tomb. And so she had me stand in my house that day and make a paper mache rock for me. And she said to me, she says, I'm going to put wire around you, but you're going to have a face. I said, that's great. And so there I am, like moving like this to get in front of the tomb. And then about 4 weeks into the practice, sister comes to me and says to me, Patrick, you don't have to be the rock anymore. So what do you mean? And she says to me, I have a better part for you. I said, a better part? You got to be kidding. And she says to me, you want to be the rock? I said, I'm the second most important person in this play. If that rock doesn't move, Jesus doesn't come out. How are we the rocks that prevent Jesus from coming out of the tomb? How have we stifled the resurrection message? We're all filled and excited for the resurrection, but it's a matter of getting that message out to other people and sharing that joy with others. My friends, my new friends, I am sure that you have the spirit of Easter within you. And it should prompt you to build communities of faith and hope, to move from those upper rooms where you're scared and anxious and worried, to find yourself moving to Jesus and asking for proof and recognizing that doubt is a part of faith, to find that wounds are essentially part of the resurrected life. And all of this, trusting in God and allowing God to be God and getting out of the way so God can be God.